I can't sleep when I lay in bed. Too much thinking in my head. I don't know what to do anymore. But come on now, tell me the score. Is there anything I can do to get out of these tragic blues? I'm a victim of circumstance. I never really had a chance. I lay down and stare at my feet. You know the world has got me beat.
Welcome to today's edition of Mental Health Matters. Our guests for today are from WIND Youth Services, and we have Erica Fonseca. And Erica is the Director of Programs for WIND Youth Services, and she'll be talking to us a little bit today about the services that WIND offers to homeless youth and some other support services that they're offering to the youth in the Sacramento community. So thank you so much for being here today,
Sure,
Erica.
thanks for having me.
I really appreciate you being here. Could you just start by telling us a little bit about the type of services that WIND offers to the community?
Yeah, absolutely. So WIND Youth Services provides services to youth experiencing homelessness between the ages of 12 and 24. We often make exceptions up to youth as high as the age of 30 because we find that it's really hard to just abruptly cut services at 24 when folks who are 25, 26 are really still in need and still kind of in that transitional young adult period of their life.
Very true.
So yeah, absolutely. So then we provide them services through our 6 programs. We have an outreach program that kind of functions as the gateway to all other services at WIND. So we have an outreach team of 4 folks who go out every single day and provide survival services.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Like out on the streets in the community? Yeah,
absolutely.
very cool.
Like along the river, downtown, midtown, North Sac, South Sac. We pretty much span all of Sacramento City. So those folks are really integral in building the rapport and the trust with the young folks who are living outside and really mitigating the barriers to services. So that's our outreach program. And then once we connect with youth via outreach, we welcome them into our drop-in center, which is essentially a day shelter, again, for 12 to 24-year-olds. At our drop-in center, which is open 7 days a week, we provide again, survival supplies, lunches. We have a clinic, like a health clinic that operates out of there that's staffed by volunteer nurses. We also have a case management program and a clinical mental health program staffed by 4 MFT interns. Wow. And then overseen by a licensed marriage family therapist. Then finally, kind of running the whole continuum of care for youth experiencing homelessness, we have 2 shelters. So we have an adolescent shelter that's for 12 to 17-year-olds. That's a federally funded shelter. It's a 21-day stay, which tends to be very challenging, as you can imagine, to find folks stability. Long-term options. And then recently, in December of 2014, we opened Sacramento's only transition age youth emergency shelter program. And that is also Sacramento's only pretty much no barrier housing first shelter for young folks between 18 and 24. So it is pet friendly, it is gender neutral, so you're not assigned room based on your gender identity, or you may be based on where you feel comfortable based on your gender identity. And then also you don't have to be med compliant or sober to enter into the shelter. So while you can't use while you're there, you are welcome to come in under the influence.
If you are under the influence.
Absolutely.
Great,
yeah.
And that's a 24-hour shelter.
Well, not quite. It's only open in the evening, so it's open from 5 p.m. to 9 a.m. Monday through Friday, and then it's open all day Sunday.
Okay.
So we encourage the young folks.
So they can come through the evening. They just have to find something to do throughout the day. That's kind of the way it works. Yeah, and
kind of the rationale behind that. I designed that program. The rationale there for me was to get youth into our drop-in center connected to our other services during the day. Okay. That way they didn't really have the option to just kind of hang out at the house if they were to want to do that. So it really encourages them to come over to the drop-in center, link with the case manager, link with a therapist, and kind of build a case plan throughout the day.
And get involved in some activities and sort of
absolutely.
Get some supports and things like that.
Yeah.
Where is it located?
Our drop-in center? It's in the heart of Midtown. It's at 18th and J.
Okay.
Yeah, okay, so easily accessible. We moved there in January. Before that, we were in Del Paso Heights.
Yeah, I remember that one. Yeah.
Yeah.
I haven't been to the new center yet.
You should come check it out. We have the whole 3rd floor of an office building, which is fabulous. I will say I feel like we've already outgrown it.
That happens.
The demand is so high. We're seeing over 600 visits a month, and about 200 of those are unique visits. So the need is great, and we are hoping to eventually kind of expand.
So is the shelter at the same place as the drop-in center?
No,
Oh, sorry.
no, it's okay.
Yeah, yeah.
We get asked that all the time. No, both of our shelters are in the Rosemont area.
Okay.
They're actually part of a duplex. So the transition age youth shelter, the Tay shelter is on one side, and then the adolescents on the other.
Oh, very good.
Yeah,
Very
it's been great.
Awesome. Yeah, and so people can access one or the other. They don't have to, if they go to the drop-in center, they don't have to go to the shelter or vice versa or any of that. It's sort of whatever they need.
Exactly. Because WIND is kind of just like overall a housing first philosophy, it really means that all services are optional to the young folks. So we recognize that when a young person comes into our drop-in center, even if they're what would be perceived as just hanging out, we see that as a huge success.
Absolutely.
A, that they've come back, and B, that they're safe both from like the outside elements, police discrimination, general discrimination. So it's excellent. But yeah, I mean, of course we encourage them to access services.
Absolutely, yeah.
But I will say our Tay shelter has over 45 youth-long wait lists, and it's 6 beds. So the need is high, and the supply is very limited. Yeah.
So we really, really need more services like this in Sacramento.
We need shelter. That's what we need. People often ask me, what do youth experiencing homelessness need? And I always just say housing. That's what they need. They don't need to be infantilized and taken care of and pulled through all of these hoops and loops. They just really need to access shelter now. And unfortunately, we really have limited access to age-appropriate shelter.
Yeah. And then housing. I mean, so because it kind of begs the next question is, are you able to find appropriate housing for some of these youth in order for them to have some kind of long-term stability? Because I know that's really a major problem for us sometimes when we're working as youth advocates with the youth, even if they're ready for that, it's just not available. I mean, it's very, very hard to find in Sacramento. And so just kind of wondering how you work through some of those issues in terms of finding folks, something safe for the longer term.
Yeah, it can be really challenging. So honestly, a lot of our job does involve safety planning. So dealing with the reality of the situation is that likely you will not find housing that you can afford. You will not find housing that is affirming of you. And so how can we make things safer for you in the interim period? So finding housing is a challenge. We do attempt to link youth to other youth and find roommate situations and things like that, or of course family reunification, pull on their social resources. Also though, I want to share that WIND is opening 12-bed permanent supportive housing program actually this month.
Really?
So again,
well, that's really wonderful.
It's awesome because it's permanent and it's housing, but 12 beds.
Right, that'll get eaten up in no time. And how long will it be? Can people just stay there for as long as? Great.
They can stay indefinitely. Because it's designed for Tay, the 18 to 24-year-old population. We're hoping to transition youth on to, if they need to go to other adult permanent supportive housing programs, to do it that way, or just transition them on to educational goals, employment goals, things like that.
And some independent living and things like that.
Exactly.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Well, that's wonderful, though. That's really exciting to hear because I know that that's something that we've needed in Sacramento for a very, very long time.
Yeah.
And so where's the funding from some of that coming from?
That's a HUD-funded program.
Okay, great, wonderful.
Yeah.
Well, good for you guys that you've been able to sort of really address those needs and meet them through, finding funding and things like that, because it's just really, really critical. I've been, working in Sacramento for a long time and working with youth for a long time, and these are some of the greatest needs that we find. And truly finding someplace safe for them to go when they're living on the streets and experiencing some of those challenges is really, really difficult. So it's very exciting to know that WIND is out there and that WIND is really supporting youth in a variety of ways.
Yeah, absolutely. We're kind of sitting with them in whatever stage of their experience with homelessness is, whether that's outside and not really quite ready to move in, or moving in, ready to move on to long-term stability. We're there. And
so, what are some of the strategies that you use to engage with the youth? Because sometimes that can be the hardest part, really, and you really have to sort of meet them where they're at and not be coercive and all of those things, and yet those needs are so great that I would imagine they really would want to come into services, but it's not always as easy as that,
Right. It's challenging. I think sometimes the staff feels more of a sense of urgency than the young folks do. So it's hard not to put that sense of urgency.
Well, because you see a kid living on the street and you're like, oh my gosh, we have to help them.
Save. Yeah, totally. And so a big way that we've been able to engage young folks is with the survival services. So really food food is huge, both in our drop-in center and through our outreach team.
Absolutely.
Also, at the risk of sounding a little ageist, having a more youthful staff has been incredibly beneficial to engage young folks. They're seeing faces that look close in age to them. They're seeing folks dressed like me. This, I always say, this is best
Not walking
practice.
around in a suit.
Totally. And then, of course, having age-appropriate workshops to give them. So playing off their interests and developing and, fostering their own passion. So we do a lot of spoken word things or drum circles or really whatever the organic interest comes up, we will facilitate it and host it at the drop-in center.
Wow, that's awesome.
That's
That's
great.
Yeah. And how, in the drop-in center is open, sorry, I just want to make sure people know when they're watching this, and if anyone really needs to access services that they know where to go. So the 18th and J is the drop-in center.
18th and J, we're open 7 days a week, but Monday through Friday from 9 to 3, and Saturday and Sunday from 10 to 2.
Okay.
Yes, and youth can just walk in, they can call.
Great.
Absolutely, I encourage them always to just drop on in. Drop-in
Wonderful.
center. Yeah.
And so, do they have to be homeless, or can they be at risk of homelessness, or there's a lot of things that put people at risk of being homeless.
Everyone is, I feel. I really like to stay mission focused on youth experiencing homelessness, but of course, youth who are precariously housed. Please.
Sometimes they might just need those supports, right?
Absolutely. And what's great about WIN, and I think also kind of unique, is that we don't card you. We take everything you say at face value. So it truly is a come as you are program. So when folks come in, they could be very well housed, and we wouldn't know because it's just a welcome that they get.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, but that's great though, because then people can feel like there's some anonymity or some sense of that freedom, that they don't necessarily have to come there and meet some criteria or fill out all this paperwork and
right, which is such a substantial barrier for a lot of programs.
It's a huge barrier.
Youth don't have IDs often, and so for that to be the first question you're asked upon accessing a service, that's so off-putting and can be quite discouraging.
And it happens all the time.
Totally, yeah.
And we hear this frequently because we don't make services accessible. Unfortunately, it's we always wonder why aren't we engaging people, or why aren't more people coming to our services? Well, it's because we're not making it more engaging for them.
Totally.
And it kind of seems like a no-brainer to some of us, but and I understand the criteria, especially with funding and contracts and things like that. But in order to really meet youth where they're at, we need to not do some of those things, and not one of the biggest things we always hear is well, every time I go to that program or to the next program, it's like I have to keep retelling my story.
Yeah.
And that in itself can be really, really traumatic sometimes. And so to really meet people where they're at, let them come and enjoy whatever aspect of the program is available, that's truly awesome. So,
thanks. It's great too, because we build so much rapport just through the day-to-day interaction, and then because we're so present in the young folks' life, that beautiful moment when they're ready to pursue change, whatever that looks like for them, we just happen to be there, and it's let's go. Now's the time.
Yeah,
so it truly is on their terms. Yeah.
That's wonderful. And so the supportive housing will be opening up this month?
Yeah, we're trying to just secure the leases right now.
So you're not quite sure where it's going to be yet. Okay.
No, it's challenging to find a progressive property management company who wants to rent to an organization who works with young people and specifically homeless young people.
Right.
Yeah, there's 2 forms of discrimination happening.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. That can be really, really challenging. So I wish you the best with that, because I think that's such a tremendous need. I know years ago in the mental health community, there was really we had one program, Slocum House years ago, and it was the only crisis residential program we had for TAY, and it was eliminated in the budget cuts, I think 2008, 2009, and it was a small facility as well. I think that was only 6 beds, but I just remember being really sad that was going away. And then where were kids that were experiencing some kind of mental health crisis?
Right.
Where could they go for a short period of time to just be in a safe place, begin to work on some of their own wellness, and just really have a place that they can go and be safe. And so it's really great to hear that some of these things are happening, and that there's a lot of really wonderful programs that you're offering out there for youth.
Yeah.
So can you tell us a little bit of some of the things that you see in terms of the mental health issues that the youth are experiencing that are coming into WIND, and kind of some of the trends or the things that you might see prevalent in their lives?
Sure, yeah, I can speak on that anecdotally, of course, but I think that as a result of the trauma of living outside, we're seeing heightened levels of anxiety, depression, sustained traumatic stress disorder. And then we are seeing higher levels of mental health conditions like what I would perceive as schizophrenia or bipolar, some pretty high need out there. And it's often hard to tell if conditions were present before becoming homeless and experiencing
which
that.
came first, the chicken or the egg? It's really hard to know.
Or completely exacerbated by like your constant quest for survival.
Right, absolutely. Yeah. And do you feel that that some of the youth are connected still with their parents or their family of origin, or do you find that there's some trauma that exists there sometimes? Is that part of the issue for some of the youth?
Yeah, I mean, we see various forms of connection, of course. Oftentimes youth are very much connected to their families, but they're coming from families who are also experiencing homelessness and, long-term historical poverty.
Long-term poverty, yeah.
Exactly, and so like the love is so present, but the ability to kind of catch them in that safety net isn't there, so then they come to us. We also see youth, who have been kicked out because of their LGBTQ identity, or youth who have, a tumultuous relationship with their parents and want nothing to do with them. So it really does run the gamut.
Yeah, I really appreciate the fact that it's kind of doesn't matter the gender and things like that, because that's really an issue in a lot of shelters. So can you tell us a little bit more about sort of how you engage some of the LGBTQ youth, because they really are at risk of this in very major ways sometimes. And so
yeah, unfortunately Sacramento's shelter system is not designed to be trans affirming at all.
Most communities are not.
Most communities, but yeah.
Really behind the 8 ball on that one. Yeah.
Total. Yeah, so because you are forced, to be placed based on the gender binary, and you're asked really invasive questions like, where are you in your transition? And, what do your genitals look like? Things like that you wouldn't ask any other person who's cis-identified. Trans people, are subjected to those questions and often so put off that they choose to remain on the streets.
Absolutely.
In lieu of accessing.
And it can be very dangerous for them.
Absolutely, trans women are at risk of sexual violence at disproportionate rates to cisgendered women and, of course, men and trans men. So at WIND, we strive to be LGBTQ affirming. It's written into all of our policies. Wonderful. So, staff are trained to ask preferred pronouns. Staff are trained to ask where youth want to be placed. We have...
How do they identify?
Exactly. Yeah. Total gender self-determination. Even if you decide identify as a multi-gendered person, we then go into like a safety conversation and a comfort level conversation. Nice. Where do you want to be placed?
I'm so impressed. You guys are awesome.
Oh,
you just don't find that too often, and those are some of the things we hear that the youth really need, that are experiencing those things. Yeah.
And then, of course, I always tell, when I do the LGBT cultural competency for homeless youth, I always just tell people, just post rainbows everywhere. Like, when young queer kids
let
come
them see that exists. Yeah.
Exactly. It's like having, Malcolm X posters up and, Sylvia Rivera posters up. Like, they need to see that, like, you care, like Black Lives Matter and trans lives matter, and like you really need to have that visible imagery to show the young folks you belong here.
This is a safe spot. You belong here. This is someplace where you can come.
Yeah, gender, color, all of it. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, great job. So, how did you learn about all of this? I'm so fascinated.
Learn about what?
Well, just youth services, LGBTQ, the cultural competency aspects. Is this things that you learn through your academic training or through working in mental health? Or?
I wouldn't even say working in mental health. I'm queer, so that definitely helps. To have like an awareness as a queer person. So that gives me some insight, but also I always tell folks, like, we're really learning as we go.
Absolutely.
Like, we have a fabulous team at WIND, and we all just love each other so much and get along so well. And so when things don't work, we say like, hey, that's not working. Let's try something else.
Right. So you have that open communication with your team. Yeah.
Yep. And then also, of course, like youth inclusion is key to a successful youth program.
Absolutely.
Like you need to hear their voices, their concerns, and address their needs and meet them.
Yeah, and have them sort of be able to voice things on the policy and program level.
Yep, absolutely.
That we're just not the adults up here designing all these programs to meet their needs, because it doesn't work that way, as I'm sure you've discovered. We really have to include them in that decision-making process. And it's really been a big part of the work that we do at NorCal MHA, and having the youth voice and bringing the youth voice to the table, even at the Division of Mental Health, and, being sort of that advocacy voice in many ways throughout the mental health system. But I have to say, sometimes it's really difficult. a number of reasons, and part of it is that people don't necessarily always want to listen to the youth voice.
Absolutely.
Or any of our voices for that matter.
True.
But it's really wonderful to see that there's an agency that's listening and is, really trying to design programs based upon those needs and what they're hearing from sort of really the grassroots youth community, because otherwise we sort of tend to design programs that are kind of unsuccessful in the sense in terms of engagement.
Yep.
People aren't going to come if it really doesn't meet their needs, or they don't feel like they belong, or and all of those things.
I tell my staff sometimes, when they'll say, Erica, like the youth aren't showing up to my group, and we're just like, well, that's because it's boring. Like,
right.
Like, we're that blunt, and it's true. Like we look inside ourselves. Like when the kids aren't showing up, we're not like, oh man, these kids,
what are we doing
they
wrong?
don't want change. It's like, no, we suck right now. Let's make this fun.
Yeah, like we're not meeting them where they need to be. We talk about that a lot in the mental health system and trying to get youth to the table. And my big thing has always been over the years, they're like, well, why don't youth come to this meeting? This is boring. I don't want to come to the meeting. If I wasn't getting paid, I wouldn't be here.
Right.
And then I love what you said about the food too. And it's the survival thing, but also people will become more engaged sometimes if you do offer a snack or some food to come to a group or things like that. I know that we always try to use food in our support groups and some of the work that we do with youth and with all populations really, because people do have that need. It's a basic need.
It's a basic need.
And we really do need to focus on filling those basic needs sometimes, and particularly when people are experiencing homelessness. Those basic needs are not being met, and they really can't work on things like recovery or wellness or those life goals, career, academics, until those basic needs are met. We sort of forget that, like, well, they're not compliant or they're not following the program. Well, they have no place to live. Like, it's really about survival at this point. So when you talk about sort of their survival needs, like how do you address those? Like what are sort of the things that you, like, what did you call it?
Survival supplies?
Yeah, the survival supplies. I like that.
So it's literal. Like we give, when we have them, we give out tents and tarps and flashlights.
Like a sleeping bag. Or
first aid kits. Yeah, of course, we're always in need of those supplies. They can be quite pricey, and so unfortunately, we're often limited to give.
We get some of those donations sometimes and give them out and through some of our programs, but it's so essential.
It is essential. Yeah, and then of course, survival supplies like harm reduction techniques, like needle exchange, like that's a survival supply. Like how people who are engaged in substance usage, how can we keep them safe while they're doing that?
Right. Harm reduction. And
absolutely,
things like that.
Harm reduction. Yeah.
So we talked a little bit about it, but I'll ask the formal question of why is WIN's approach beneficial to mitigating the impact and consequences of mental illness in youth who are experiencing homelessness? And I think you talked a lot about the different traumas, and the things that impact that,
Yeah, and I mean, if you're asking, like, what is WIN's approach? It's the radical promotion of the youth's self-determination. That's WIN's approach, and it's beneficial to reducing consequences of mental illness because we show to the youth that they have the ability to make positive decisions for themselves. Like, we sit with them through the trauma, we sit with them through the success, and I really think that our approach is one of empowerment. And so, of course, it helps like to mitigate feelings of defeat or burnout because you're seeing that you have the ability.
Yeah, and I just really think that's so important from sort of the overall mental health component, because so often in the mental health system, what we've seen is sort of we take away people's power. Well, oftentimes through a number of things, thinking that we know what's best for them, then we force medication or whatever those things are that we've done traditionally over the years through the medical model and things like that. And oftentimes what people say to us is they didn't know they had that power within them. They didn't know that they could, really affect change in their own lives, because in so many ways the message was you're too sick anyway, so we need to sort of like take away this power from you. And it's sort of the message that the mental health system has sent. And I don't mean, today I think we've gotten much more progressive and moving away from that. But that is still sometimes the message that some people hear, whether they're youth or adults or even sometimes older adults. And, we say, oh, well, you need to be on disability, and it really is about tapping into that, your own power within you, that you do have the power to make choices and to change the way things are and to get on a better path. And I love that you guys are about the self-determination. And I think you said something else that really made me think about that, is that we don't infantile them. I mean, that's big, that's huge, that we don't sort of treat them like they don't know what's best for themselves.
Right. Right, exactly. When we're engaging with folks who are experiencing really high levels of mental illness, like, maybe even like forms of psychosis, I always tell my staff, I heard this quote once in a youth mental health first aid training I was part of, and it was Islands of Reality. And I thought it was such a beautiful term, because even when somebody is experiencing psychosis, you really see that they still have like those moments of lucidity.
Right, absolutely.
And you just talk with them, and even when they're not, there's still such a richness there that you can kind of pull from, that I think sometimes is, of course, stigmatized, and also you just want to cure and fix rather than, taking your time.
Yeah, and I know that people always say, well, they lack insight, or, when we are experiencing those things, but I've always felt that there's still some insight there.
Exactly.
I really, really, truly believe that. They don't completely lack insight, or we don't completely lack insight when we're experiencing that. But there are times, but there's always, it seems to me, that kernel of lucidity, or that kernel of truth in somebody's life, or what they're experiencing at that time. And I think we really need to honor and affirm that, and not just try to fix, always trying to fix, and I think that we've historically done that so often. And I think, we're really big on the peer support and coming alongside somebody, meeting them where they're at, and really kind of walking them through some of that, rather than this helpee kind of relationship. And I think that's so very important.
Yeah.
And it sounds like that's really so much of what you guys are doing at WIND.
Yeah, and actually we're funded through the Respite Partnership Collaborative to have a peer counselor program. So we actually have 2 women at WIND who are official peer counselors. That is their role. And they're young. They both happen to be women of color, have experienced mental health issues, have experienced homelessness. And so they've been a fabulous addition to just be extra youthful, because we're all pretty youthful, but and relatable. But these gals have been really essential in showing, you're not alone, and I've been through it too, and I know how to navigate the system with you.
Yeah, wonderful.
Yeah.
So you mentioned there's a waiting list for the shelter, and so how do you deal with that? That's tough.
We feel sad about it constantly.
No, I mean, imagine so.
It's a nightmare, to be really honest. But how do we deal with it? We stay in close touch with the young folks while they're on our wait list, and we safety plan with them. So how can you stay where you are one day longer? If you do go outside, how can we keep you safe? Where's a good place to camp down? Who's a buddy that you can camp down with? Things like that. And then, of course, the drop-in center is a huge port in the storm.
Right. So they can at least come and get some support during the day, and sort of, learn some resources and things like that. Yeah, that's wonderful. Yeah, I know that there's a lot of places in Sacramento where a lot of the homeless folks hang out. Where do the youth tend to gravitate towards? I'm from the East Coast. It was too cold back there. Like, we didn't see a lot of homeless people all year round, and in Sacramento you really do. And I've been a part of so many different coalitions over the years to end homelessness, but it doesn't seem like we're really ending it. And I know we don't really have enough affordable housing.
Right.
That's a big part of it, I think.
Well, I can tell you where youth hang out, but just really quickly to your point about ending homelessness is, homelessness is a visible manifestation of a fundamentally unjust and equal society. So until we do a huge paradigm shift and, reorganization of America, you are going to see homelessness.
Yeah.
So, but that aside, where do homeless youth hang out? Well, everywhere. People often think, who are homeless youth? Where do they come from? They come from your next door neighbor's house. They come from your house.
Right. And they're not that removed from our lives. Yeah.
Absolutely not. So we see them all over. Of course, they are coming to Midtown, but they were here already. That's what actually necessitated our move to Midtown, was the fact that we knew young folks were hanging out there.
We're already hanging out there.
Yeah. And, that's been kind of hard, because we've been getting a little bit of pushback, because folks think that we brought youth experiencing homelessness to Midtown, but actually...
Well, they're just a little bit more visible because they're coming to your program, and that can be very difficult, for the neighbors.
Yeah, it's a change. But these are our community members, and we need to recognize them as such. They have a place in this community in Midtown.
Yeah, absolutely. So how is that going with the neighbors?
That's a can of worms. It's been challenging. Yeah, it's been challenging, but I think that WIN's done a really good job at trying to build rapport with our neighbors. We do a monthly community cleanup.
There you go.
Yeah, I have a complaint log that I keep, so when there are issues, they go to me directly, and I address them with our neighbors immediately. And so that's been really helpful, just that personal, interpersonal conversation.
Knowing that they have somebody they can at least talk to.
Everyone just wants to be heard, and so we do a lot of, I do a lot of work with our neighbors in that capacity. And then, of course, we always talk with our youth at our weekly youth council meetings on what it means to be a good neighbor. So yes, you are living outside, but how can we do that in a way that is
It's respectful. And,
exactly. And we expect the same respect from our neighbors.
Right. So hopefully that gets a little bit better. You haven't been there that long, so I know at first sometimes it's very difficult when we start programs like this, and everybody's like, "Oh, you have all the mentally ill youth kids coming in here, and they're homeless," and And over the years, I've kind of heard it all from various programs that we've operated, and just that, kind of that stigma and the discrimination. And but I do find that over time, especially if you do prove yourself to be a good neighbor and they see some positive things happening, you can really change some of that perspective. And so hopefully some of that is shifting. It hasn't probably been quite long enough, but
slowly
it
but
sounds like you're
surely.
doing what you can to try to mitigate some of that. Yeah,
absolutely. And I just hope folks realize that our presence there is actually a huge mitigating factor,
Yeah.
not a factor that exacerbates the mental illness. You know what I mean? Us being
You're trying
there
to support and
is making folks in Midtown safer.
Right. And so maybe they're, the kids aren't out using drugs or wandering the streets, and so it's actually a really positive thing. But I know
Exactly.
it's hard because I think people want some of us to be invisible. They don't want to see it. They don't want to see it in their community. But it exists in their community. It's already there, like you said. So,
Absolutely.
well, good luck with that one. I know that's always such a difficult thing. I know we've seen a lot of that, particularly in Sacramento, but in some of the other communities we work in as well. That whole "not in my backyard" type of mentality. We run a program up at Amador, and it's really it's called the Wellness Center, but anybody can come, and it's open during the day. It's not a shelter, but we do give out the survival kits and things like that as well. And I get the things I hear is that, well, we go by, we see everybody outside smoking. Okay.
So people smoke.
Who are they bothering? You know what I mean? And and I get these complaints, and sometimes I just go, okay, but nobody's, we have had I knock on wood a little bit, but we've never had any kind of really major issue. No one's ever, hurt anybody, and this has been open for several years now, and it's really very positive in the community, and we help so many people, but yet those are sort of the things we hear. We still hear it a lot, and it's hard.
It is hard. It's just really hard living your life outside, under constant scrutiny, under
you don't belong.
Exactly.
Sort of that message every day of your life.
Yeah, and our youth aren't doing anything typically that's out of the norm. They're doing things like the smoking and drinking. We have the privilege of doing that in our homes.
Yeah, right, exactly.
But unfortunately,
and most kids do experience that at some point.
Of course. So it's really, I want folks to understand, it is hard being visible, and I don't feel like they are more deserving of any more judgment than any of the choices any of us make, simply because they are
It's just
seen.
kind of a target on them.
Yeah.
Which makes it even harder for them sometimes in so many ways, and sort of that double stigma that begins to happen.
Right, and then also the fact that Sacramento has the anti-camping ordinance, so it's illegal to live outside.
Yeah, whatever happened with all of that? Remember we were going to do the whole tent city thing, and and that just seemed like a pretty good idea to me. If we already know that. Yeah, I think that's and we can really sort of maintain the health and safety piece of it, and that and then it kind of just fizzled. So
I know. I'm not sure. I know that Wind is kind of talking about doing a stake down this year. I don't know if you've seen the stake down. It's kind of through Sacramento Homeless Organizing Committee. They really kind of wanted to put it in the youth hand this year, so we may do that. Staff capacity permitting. We would kind of like to head that up to bring attention to the fact that our young folks are constantly facing, police harassment and criminalization simply
constantly for these kind of things.
For quality of life, things like living outside and sharing food.
Right. Yeah, and the whole pathologizing and criminalizing those kind of survival behaviors is really difficult, because then you get a record for some misdemeanor, and then you're having to deal with all the court systems, and then still trying to survive is really. I noticed that some of the youth can really get kind of caught up in that for a while, and it's very hard to get rid of all of that stuff so that you can live a productive life and be a contributing member of society, because you have these charges that you're trying to clear and you don't really have the resource. It just can become a vicious cycle.
Yeah, it absolutely does become that.
Yeah. So are you guys able to sort of help with some of the goal setting? And it sounds like you have a case management program, and it's just how important it is so that the youth can kind of find meaningful activities in their life, whether it's school or jobs and some of those things, to really kind of to lead them on that path to becoming independent.
Yeah, our youth advocate, we use youth advocate synonymously with case manager. So
Okay,
our youth
okay.
advocates, it sounds less clinical. Our youth
we-
advocates, pardon?
I said we used youth advocate also.
Yeah, it's a good one.
Yeah.
Yeah, they build the case plan with the young folks, and they engage them in what's called motivational interviewing. So it's like open-ended question asking, letting them come to their own answers to things, and yeah, definitely. I mean, yeah, we assist them in whatever their goals are.
Right.
Yeah, sure. And then of course, we do work like helping them re-enroll in City College. or
helping them
applying-
find financial aid and
Sure,
all of those
yeah.
things. 'Cause we do a lot of that as well. So, it
That's
sounds
kind-
like that's something we could maybe even collaborate more on, and
Sure.
some of those goal setting and things like that. Yeah.
Yeah, it's kind of like basic when the youth comes in. There's like a few key things that that often surface as what the youth is interested in. It's like any type of vital documents, like birth certificate,
Yes,
social
huge.
ID. That's huge. Medi-Cal, huge.
Right.
Linking them to our counseling program, gigantic. And then
Right.
from there, we usually start going off into more intermediate goals like housing, education,
Right,
employment.
Yeah, you have to get those immediate things taken care of. But some of that can be just really frustrating. The vital records and things like that, and trying
my
to
gosh.
hunt that down for people. Isn't it amazing?
Yes, we actually had a youth advocate drive to Stockton with one of
You do. You have to go.
our young
and-
gals. Yeah, we have the Malcolm X approach, the by any means necessary. I was like, dude, just go.
Yeah.
Take
yeah.
her, because it was so challenging just to get a social, which was the one thing holding her up from the California Conservation Corps to get into a housing
Wow,
program.
Right.
So this was why she was living outside.
Yeah, I know, and those barriers are just they just don't seem like they would be that hard, but they really are. And if you don't have transportation, and you don't have money, and you don't have somebody to take you there, how are you really supposed to get that
Childcare,
fixed?
pet sitting, all of those things.
So you said that the shelter's pet friendly.
Yeah.
That was really great to hear too, because no shelters are pet friendly.
I think it's the only one.
I know that the folks we've had the folks from the Front Street Shelter on the show before, and they will take pets for a period of time if
Yeah,
somebody's
they've been great.
homeless or while they've been in the shelter. And so that was really exciting for me to hear too, because I love my pets, but I also think they're kind of therapy to us, and companionship, and really promote positive mental health and wellness. And so to be homeless to begin with, and then have your pet taken away from you, or having to, relinquish your
to
pet,
choose.
that's just a horrible thing for people to have to deal with. And especially for young adults that are kind of trying to navigate all of this, it would be really sad for them to give up maybe the one thing that they really feel connected to.
Yeah.
So how do you manage all of that, Erica?
the pet friendly shelter.
Yeah, I know that can be kind of
It's been a learning process for sure.
Right.
But we have a max capacity, so we have 2 crates, so we can allow 2 dogs at
Okay.
a time. So
Okay.
if we are at max capacity, then
Yeah, then
unfortunately
nobody else can
you have
come
to wait
in.
a little
Yeah.
longer. But that doesn't include service animals. So a lot of youth do have their pets
Right,
registered as
right.
service animals,
Okay.
which can kind of be a double-edged sword, but has been really great for them in a lot of
Yeah,
ways.
yeah.
And so we'll let dogs come in not crated when they are
Right, when they're
a service
pet- yeah,
animal.
yeah.
But yeah, it's been great. The youth love having their animals there. It's positive for the other folks staying at the shelter. I mean, all
Right,
around,
right.
it's just been incredible. I would probably say the one challenge is the fact that oftentimes the dogs aren't used to being indoors and be crated indoors. So then that, they'll start crying and whining. So it does take some work with the pets when they come in. But other than that, I'm excited about it. And if we can open up a transitional housing program at the end of this year, which would be 10 more beds, we'll make that program pet friendly as well.
Wow,
Yeah.
that's great. I love it. So you're the director of programs. So you're in charge of all of this.
All of it, yeah. So we have a
Wow,
staff of about 32 and run 6 programs.
Wow.
So yeah.
You have your hands full.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah, so tell me a little bit about your background, if you don't mind. I just am curious because this is a tall order, and you seem so young.
I am,
You
yeah.
are.
I'm 26.
Yeah.
It is a tall order. It's incredibly hard, and for me, again, I hate to say learning process again, but it really has been.
Oh, absolutely, yeah.
Yeah, my background, I don't know. I was working at Loaves and Fishes before coming here.
Okay,
So when I
okay.
started graduate school, I worked at Loaves and Fishes in the legal clinic. So that cycle, that vicious cycle of camping tickets that turn into
Yeah,
warrants and
yeah,
fines,
exactly.
that's what I was doing.
Okay.
So I'm really familiar
So
with
you were
that.
very familiar with some of the challenges, yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. And I just got so into homeless justice and justice for people who are experiencing living outside and
Yeah,
all of what that means. And I got involved with Sacramento Homeless Organizing Committee just on a personal level. It's a grassroots activist coalition. And then I met an outreach worker from WIND, and he and I struck up kind of a bond. And he's like, okay, we need to kind of breathe new radical life into WIND. Like, would you consider applying? And I said, yeah, absolutely. And when I applied, I thought I was applying for a street outreach worker position. And Susie, the executive director, was like, no, I want you for director of programs. And I was like,
Good
all right,
for
I'll
you.
try this out.
Yeah,
So
that's great.
how I
You're
made
wonderful.
it.
Yeah, I
Thanks.
can tell you really get this.
Yeah.
And that's so very important, really, to have somebody like you to sort of lead the charge for some of this.
Yeah.
So you talk a little bit about like the homelessness and the social justice around that. Can you kind of talk to me a little bit more about that and sort of, I mean, it's a really complex issue, so we can't really solve it or understand it completely today. But I think that you really touch on something that's really important in terms of sort of the broader picture about why people end up homeless, why this is such a social issue, and that like we talked about, that there really is no end until we change some of those things. And so I just would love to hear your thoughts on that.
Oh yeah, God, homelessness and its experience it's such a multi-layered thing. I mean, specifically like the social justice aspects in Sacramento, like what we need now, for sure, is to abolish the anti-camping ordinance. That would make people's lives tangibly better now. Quality of life that they so deserve. That would help it.
So they don't feel like criminals every day of their lives.
Exactly, and they're not criminalized every day. And also the gentrification that's going on because of the arena, that needs, we need to be more humane with the development that's happening and not just move folks along and not treat them as though they shouldn't be there. So the arena has had a very, very negative effect on the young people with whom we work. Because they're facing higher rates of criminalization than they were before.
Yeah, because of the development of the arena and sort of all the money that's coming in and all that. The very kind of
Business
affluent sort of.
I mean, they're closing down single room occupancy hotels to open up boutique hotels. So that's
I noticed that. Some of the SROs are going away really rapidly, and they really were sort of a safety net for people.
Absolutely,
and they were the last resort. And honestly, they were good for people. I mean, they, at least people had a place to stay. They were affordable. They could, they took SSI and things like that. And it was really, we had quite a few of those rooms available. And now it seems like they're really shrinking. We don't really have anything like that anymore, huh?
No. And rapid, services are decreasing and funding is kind of being misprioritized.
And sort of the downtown area was a really nice place for them because people could jump on the light. I mean, there was transportation, there was places to eat nearby, there were, activities so that if they stayed there, they could still have sort of a quality of life. And now, with that going away, it's sort of like what
relegated to the margins, further to the
so where do the people go?
Out of sight, out of mind. I also feel like Sacramento City could do more to fund homeless services. I think that a lot of other cities are much more generous in funding shelters and programming, and I think they've allotted 1.1 million. I hope I'm not misquoting that. And I of course, it could be a lot larger considering we paid, $8 million for Winnie the Pooh statue in front of the arena. So to me, it just seems the larger social justice issue is a misplaced priorities.
Yeah, absolutely. And especially when you think about that the youth are our future.
Absolutely.
So we need to be investing and not marginalizing and not making it more difficult for people to succeed in life and to really find their way, and to welcome them. I know I have to say that sometimes in talking to even some of my friends, they'll be like, well, we don't want to see that in our neighborhood or we don't want to. And so I'm just curious, what would you say to them? I mean, I know what I would say and what I try to say.
But you're classist.
But I think that you are very articulate about this, so I need to take a page out of your book here. But
I guess I'd probably explore that a little bit with them. Why do you feel that way?
Yeah, why does it bother you so much?
What threat is this person who's living outside posing to you, if any? Just maybe not, I'm digressing a bit, but I just want to share. I lived at G and 11th, and I had a man who was living literally right outside my window under my deck. And I engaged with him as any other neighbor that lives by me. I'd walk down there and be like, dude, it's 10 o'clock, keep it down. You got a lot going on right now.
Hey, I have some leftovers, you want them?
Totally. I mean,
when I lived downtown, I know I did that whole thing.
We were cool. He and I, we were cool. And so I would just encourage folks to recognize that homelessness is an experience. It's not a pathology.
And it doesn't make somebody inherently dangerous.
Thank you. No, not at all.
Yeah. And I think that's what kind of people have that thought in their head that you're homeless and you're surviving on the streets, so you must be a threat to me.
Yeah, it's because we live in a culture that values wealth so much, so when you don't have it, you're seen as problematic, or like there's something deficient in you. Why can't you succeed? Well, come on.
Right.
The deck is
there's
stacked
way
against
more.
you.
There's way more to it than that.
Absolutely.
There really is. Yeah, and we really don't know the whole story. I mean, everybody has a story, and we don't know. We oftentimes don't even want to listen to what those people's stories are, really. And how they got into this predicament, and sort of what things. I mean, generally speaking, many things have to sort of fall apart in your life but through no fault of your own. Oftentimes, it may not have anything to do with any of the choices you made. It could be, the poverty, the socioeconomic, institutionalized, poverty and things like that bring people to those places. And to have that mercy and compassion, I think that's sort of really lacking, I mean, I went to Catholic school my whole life, and those are things that we were taught to go and help the homeless. I grew up in Boston.
Beatitudes, right?
Yeah, and we had to go make. I remember it was the Pine Street Inn back in Boston, and so every day we would make peanut butter and jelly sandwiches. That was kind of our class, and we'd bring them to the homeless people that were around the Pine Street Inn, or it was the shelter, And I don't know that the youth of America and sort of our society really is I mean, I know there are places like your place and a lot of our nonprofits and some of the churches that really still do care, but it seems like we've kind of, as a society, gotten away from some of that. We're a little bit more judgmental than we are compassionate anymore about some of those needs.
Yeah, definitely. It's that, individualistic mentality of pull yourself up by your bootstraps.
Yeah, and everybody can do it, and I did it, why can't you, kind of thing.
No, totally. If you did it, you're an anomaly. We all have safety nets. They just look differently for all of us.
And everybody needs supports. Nobody did it on their own.
Exactly.
Nobody did. I don't care what anybody tells me.
Totally.
I know that, I've overcome a lot of odds in my life, but I know that I didn't do it alone.
Nope.
I didn't do it completely by myself. I had to have some support, along the way, and I was fortunate to have that support. And to learn things and to understand even how to overcome some of the mental health challenges that I had. And so that's, it's a process, and you need people and you need support along the way. Nobody does it alone.
Yeah, exactly.
And just the importance of community.
Community is huge, and that's why I'm just forever emphasizing that these young folks that we work with are our community members. And I just really, really need folks to recognize that, because I think that's like the humanizing component that would kind of change funding, would kind of change, our perspective of these young folks. We wouldn't see them as people to be feared. We wouldn't see them as people to be judged.
Right. Yeah, and they are our community, and we need to build community.
Yeah.
And they, hopefully it sounds like that's some of what you're doing, really, with the work that WIND is doing, is sort of building community even amongst the youth themselves. And I was kind of wondering about that when you were talking about the various programs. Do you find that sometimes the youth connect with each other and offer support to one another?
Oh God, yeah. Actually,
that's a beautiful thing, though.
It's so beautiful. I mean, we fall in love with them. They fall in love with each other. I mean, we have issues, no doubt.
No, everybody does. Yeah.
It's a beautiful thing. And actually, it's one of the number one survival strategies of young people living outside is a street family. It's pairing up with people, but that again is a double-edged sword, because it lends safety to you, but then you become more visible, and
because there's more of you.
So then you're seen as a mob, you're seen as a group, and people, when they see these young people in groups, they need to recognize that that's an actual survival strategy.
Absolutely.
That isn't like a mob or a gang.
Yeah, we're forming a big homeless gang.
That's like, let's bunk down tonight so I don't get raped.
Right.
Yeah.
And so are those some of the things you do hear from the youth about being raped or being
sexual violence?
Yeah, assaulted I know that happens a lot to homeless people. They're at risk.
Yeah, that's very, very common.
Yeah.
Yep.
So how do you guys help link to the greater overall services in terms of mental health? I mean, do you work with the overall mental health system and link folks? And
we do, through county, through Access. We link folks through there. Access comes with some barriers as well.
Absolutely.
In terms of
meeting the criteria, all of those things that we just talked about.
Right. Needing a phone number to call back, things like that.
Yes.
So, but Access is big for us for sure.
Yeah,
and
absolutely.
then community mental health projects like Gender Health Center have been a huge asset to us too, where it's more kind of immediate and addressing the youth's mental health needs in probably a more radical, transformative way.
Right.
And then, of course, your primary care providers when they have them going that route.
Yeah. So some of the other supports that you're able to work with, or I know with the Respite Collaborative, you guys all sort of kind of work amongst yourselves in a way, you know.
Yeah, I mean, TLCS has been great. Like the Respite
they're
Center.
wonderful. They're wonderful. I love that place.
I love that place too. I got to tour it, and
people.
Dwayne was so nice and laid
He's
back.
awesome, isn't he? I love him. He was on the show, yeah.
Oh, awesome. I was like sitting in the chair and he had me put my feet up, and it was just a great experience, and I feel so confident now referring young people.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, once you see it and see what the work that they're doing. And
so they've been a great partner. LGBT Center is a great partner too.
Yeah.
Their respite programs funded through RPC, like ours. And what's great is when our drop-in center closes at 3, their drop-in center opens at 3.
Oh, wow.
So it's like this beautiful overlap.
Yeah, that's wonderful.
Yeah.
So what are some of the things that you would do to change the landscape for homeless youth if you kind of had these unlimited resources?
Perfect world?
Yeah, we talked about it a little bit, but
housing.
Yeah.
Housing, absolutely. Scholarships and housing. That's what I would do.
So scholarships for
college, city college, university, things like that. Basically, I kind of operate under the philosophy that people deserve bread and roses. So, sustenance, but also things of beauty. Like regardless of where you are in your life, like you deserve things of beauty. So I would like to see programming designed to enrich their lives and, fulfill lives of meaning for these young people, not just provide them with the bread. The sustenance. So that'd be
because when we lose those things of beauty is really when our mental health becomes compromised.
Absolutely.
And it's those little grains of beauty that we find in life that build our mental wellness, really,
The small moments.
Yeah. And it's what gives people hope.
Yep.
Because sometimes when you experience these things, you really lose hope. You're like, well, nobody cares about me. Why should I care about myself? And that just can be that whole downward spiral, that sort of leads to the self-loathing or the substance abuse or all of those other, kind of risk factors. And I think that holding on to those things of beauty, whatever they are for people, is just so critical.
Yeah. It's essential. Yeah, so programs really need to foster like these young people's desires and like hobbies. Like we had a young man, he actually passed away outside 2 months ago now, and he was so into beading, and our counselor, our therapist, would just bead with him during their session, and they would just create things of beauty together, and it made this young man just open up so great to be able to share his skill and his love, and it was just excellent.
Yeah, I love that. That's wonderful. I know, do you know Wellspring Women's? Yeah, they do a lot with like art and just kind of meeting people where they're at too. And I just, I love those type of programs that are trying to bring, to kind of integrate that sense of beauty with whatever the therapy or the interventions are to just really kind of get people back in touch with that. I think so often, when you live on the street or marginalized or experiencing some of these mental health challenges, it's just really easy to lose sight of that and to look at the world very dark and not as something that holds promise or beauty or love or compassion for us. And to instill that is so important to any of these programs, really.
Yeah, it's like you are valuable. You are valued.
Yes.
You have things to share. You have insight.
There's something beautiful in you. Yeah.
God, every single kid.
Yeah,
for
absolutely.
Sure. Even when they're annoying as hell, they're still
awesome. Yeah. Well, I can really tell that you have such a passion for this work, and I have just enjoyed talking to you, and it's contagious. So nice. Whatever you're doing is just to get there is really wonderful. And so I thank you so much for being on the show today and for sharing with the community sort of what's going on with WIND and all the wonderful things that you guys are doing in the community, and just letting people know that you exist and these services exist and how important they are to everyone. Is there a number that you'd want to share with folks if they wanted to get a hold of WIND and connect with services in some way? I just want to kind of
a couple of things. If folks are interested in volunteering or coming to do a tour or reaching out on an administrative level, please contact me at my information to get into. I wrote it down, but I don't have it in front of me, and I don't know it by heart.
You may have given it to the folks on the show, because I know they'll run the numbers at the end of
number?
the show. Yeah,
excellent. So that's for our adolescent shelter, and then the 4900 numbers for our drop-in center. So please have young folks call that number, or again, I encourage them to just show up. Come as you are.
Okay, great. Yeah. And so the 916561. 4,900 numbers for the drop-in center. Okay.
Yeah, and youth, like a street outreach worker or a peer counselor will answer that phone and chat with them. So
wonderful,
yeah.
wonderful. Well, thanks so much for being on the show,
Thanks
Erica.
so
Keep up the
much.
good work
Thank you.
and keep your passion alive. It's really, really important in this kind of work. And sometimes, you know, all of the challenges can kind of get us down and get us discouraged, but keep that passion alive because it's a really beautiful thing. And I think that you're great for the youth, and I'm so glad that they have you in Wind, and so that's just wonderful.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah.
And thank you all for tuning in, and please remember that your mental health matters, and we hope to hear from you next time.
When I think of where I've been, the good times and the bad, on a scale of 1 to 10, either way I'm glad, 'cause I'm not alone. As I'm reaching for the phone, your voice is there, you really care, you're my comfort zone. Sometimes when I'm lost, crushed beneath the pain, though I can't afford the cost, I just smile and play the game. But there's a healing place where I cannot pretend. Your smiling face, your heart's embrace heals me again. So even when the storm is strong and I'm deaf to my own cry, I faintly hear a distant song, and I simply can't deny that I'm not alone. 10,000 times I've known my best bet is that first step for hope. Trying to stand tall, I'm haunted by the past. With my back against that wall, one thing is clear at last. The kind of love you show to me flows from an endless stream, with shores so wide it won't subside. My mind had never dreamed how I'm not alone. Even when I'm on my own, your gentle touch is much too much to let me roll. So even when the storm is strong and I'm deaf to my own cry, I faintly hear a distant song, and I simply can't deny